So when you look at the death camps, what the Nazi doctors did was they performed inhumane medical experiments. If you ever got to go to the American Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., you can see a lot of the film footage. The Nazis kept a lot of records of everything that they did, so it wasn't hard to know what doctor was doing what and to go ahead and charge them with war crimes after the war is over. So between 5 and 6 million Jews die in the Holocaust. There's about 4 million other people who also die in the Holocaust. So it's estimated about 10 million people died. Some of them died from starving, shootings, being overworked. And there are other groups like the Gypsies, who are the Romanians. They're travelers. And then you got intellectuals who will also be killed. Slavs and other groups. Anybody that basically Hitler thought was inferior, anybody that Hitler felt was someone who essentially was non-Aryan. But it was anybody who was an enemy to the Nazi Party. So that's just how the concentration camps worked. So you had about 6 million Jewish people who died, but you have about 4 million other groups of people who also are killed in the camps. So you can't discount any of that, okay? Let me just fix this 1 second. So the new order in Asia as well. So the Japanese politics, you have this great Asian belief that they want to make Asia for Asians. So the Great East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, Asia for Asians. And so you have these puppet governments that are being established in any conquered area that Japan does conquer. So when they do conquer, they put up a fake government, which the Japanese government basically controls. The Japanese military really is in charge, even of the emperor himself. So Emperor Hirohito is actually being controlled by the Japanese military. The traditional values are going to be stressed, particularly obedience and filial piety. So, faith based on your family. Like you obey your family, you obey your leader, you obey the rule. Resentment and resistance start. So initially many took the Japanese at face value and they cooperate, Asia for Asians. And the support's going to start to give way to resentment. The Buddhists are going to be obliged to recognize the Japanese emperor as divine, because when you look at Japan, their emperor is God here on earth. And so when the United States does conquer Japan, General Douglas MacArthur will make the Japanese emperor speak on the radio. And this was like groundbreaking. The reason why he'll do it is because you could not hear the Japanese emperor's voice because it was pure and he was God. And so now God is speaking to you on the radio and your head's still intact. It didn't explode. So he's not a God. So that's why we do that. Nanjing is going to be raped, and what that basically means is that when they get in there to China, they destroy just about everybody. They use biological warfare, you name it. The Japanese believe that they are racially superior to the Chinese because of the fact that they have not been conquered. They were a group of people who were pretty homogeneous. 800,000 Koreans are going to be sent overseas to work on forced labor camps. And there's a dilemma for colonial nationalists. There's no love for the West, but they feel that Japan is just as bad. So it's like, do you go with the devil you know or the devil you don't know? The Japanese are being just as cruel, just as vicious, but they're Asian. And the West, they're just as mean, but they're Westerners, they're European. So the home front, even more than World War I, World War II is considered a total war. You get a mobilization of the people. So mobilization is getting your economy, your people, your society gun-ho for the war. In the Soviet Union, during 900-day siege of Leningrad, people are going to eat dogs, cats, mice, you name it. If it's moving, it ain't a human, it's food. So factories are going to be moving into the Russian interior. You're going to start seeing more factories, more industrialization. Women work in the factories and everywhere else. Women actually will fight in World War II on the Soviet side. So they fight as female pilots. They're called the Night Witches. And so you see that because the Soviet Union, they do promise equality, they even promise gender equality in that. So when the war happens, women are on the front line in the Soviet Union. The United States, there's no threat of war on its own territory until you actually have Pearl Harbor. And then what you're going to see in the United States is a huge mobilization of the economy. And part of this huge mobilization of the economy is the U.S. is going to supply the Allies, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union with equipment. You're going to see women filling the void of the male workers who are drafted are men who just signed up anyway. So our economy is really mobilized, and it's going to end the Great Depression here in the United States. So the economy, the mobilization of the economy, it's going to cause some social problems. There's a lack of housing in the cities. You have health facilities that are kind of on the decline, and you do get an increase in teenage prostitution. 16 million in uniform and another 16 million are relocated in the war effort. What you're going to start seeing in America after Pearl Harbor is internment camps of Japanese Americans. So Japanese Americans are sent to internment camps. An internment camp is where you're basically forcibly relocated to a new area. And America will relocate the Japanese Americans to the western part. Because if Japan does actually try and launch a full-scale invasion or launch another attack on the United States, it's going to be on the western zone. And Americans fear that the Japanese Americans are spying for Japan. There's going to be race riots in the north, particularly when African Americans or black Americans are going to move from the south to work in the war industries, just like they did in World War I with the Great Migration. You're going to see this again in World War II, where African Americans are going to see this as an opportunity to get a better job and to escape the segregation, the racism, the Jim Crow laws in the American South. So when the war is over, though, this is going to be an issue because these black Americans are going to want to keep their jobs. The females, the Rosie the Riveters, they're going to want to keep their jobs too. But when the white soldiers come home, they're going to want their old jobs back. And they're not going to really care that there's been people that have been occupying their job. So when the boys come home, they want their jobs back. And this is why the United States will come out with the GI Bill. And the GI Bill will give education and home loans to U.S. veterans. And it's to do this so that you get them retooled, reschooled for a new job after being a soldier. Because remember, when you're a soldier, you eat, think, train like a soldier. I mean, like you are, there is no individuality. You are all the same. And so now after the war is over, they got to teach you again how to be an individual. In Germany, when Hitler is trying to mobilize for war, he is going to try and maintain morality, the moral of the German people. But Hitler did not reduce production of consumer goods, and he did not increase armament production until 1942. So really the Germans aren't consuming any more goods. Any less goods. They're consuming just the same amount. Like they're not doing any rationing like other countries will do here in America and the Soviets and other countries. They all actually reduce and ration their food supplies. Hitler, he doesn't actually try and do any of that because his whole economy is based on conquest. There's a total mobilization of the economy that did not occur until 1944. So unlike the U.S. and unlike the Soviet Union, where they are trying to mobilize a lot for the war, Germany doesn't do it until it's a little bit too late. And unlike the Russian women, German women are largely going to escape the war effort. He does have German women who test his food, and he has food test tasters all the time to see if he's getting poisoned. In Japan, there's going to be a military draft, and that's going to be adopted in 1938. Labor unions are dissolved because a labor union demands more money, better pay, better hours, better pay, better working conditions, and that's not going to be considered nationalistic, and so those are not going to be allowed. Traditional values are going to be enforced, including the divinity of the emperor, so worshiping the emperor, the cult of the emperor. You are having the way of the warrior, so the kamikaze, the divine wind, the suicide missions against the American Navy. These are pilots who will go ahead and fly their planes into the sides of the American Navy battleships, thinking that they're going to go ahead and cause huge catastrophes, that it'll cause a huge crisis to the American battleships. It really doesn't do anything other than show us that the Japanese are willing to give everything, including their life, for this war. As in Germany, most Japanese women, they did not work. They didn't do any war work in the factories. Some of them are going to be used as forced labor from Korea and China instead. So what you kind of see the Japanese doing is taking foreigner workers and making them work. They do, like with the rape of Nanjing, they're going to go ahead and force the Chinese women to be prostitutes to the Japanese officers. So you have that going on, but you don't have a really female population in Japan that's mobilizing for the war. So you get bombings of cities. Basically, cities in Europe get blasted to death. The German Air Force attacks, like London, the Blitz, and the British are going to go ahead and they save Britain. They do have a lot of bombing, but I mean, they save their city. And it's the belief that the bombing of the civilians are going to reduce the enemy's will to resist, but that's not what's going to happen. Instead, those British people pull out their sidearms and they start shooting at the German planes as they go over Britain. I mean, it's just a mentality that you're not going to break. Now, the bombing of Germany. The Allies started bombing Germany, and we bomb day and night. I mean, it's a saturation bombing, and that means that we don't stop. The Americans start doing the precision bombings in the daytime, and they start bombing military and industrial targets. The U.S. gets a lot of criticism because they do not bomb the actual trains that are going to the concentration camps. And the reasoning when FDR is asked, I mean, and the presidents do get asked, why does the United States, why did we not bomb the actual railroad train lines into the concentration camps, is that FDR felt that by ending the war, you would save the Jews and the other Holocaust victims. But America is bombing things that they feel are industrial. So they do bomb railroad train lines that are going into the factory system. Bombing of Dresden, February 1945, you get a firestorm. It kills 100,000. So sometimes when they bomb the factories have huge explosions that kill everybody in the surrounding area because you have towns built up around factories. During the war, 500,000 German civilians die in the bombing. It doesn't weaken the German morale, though, and it doesn't destroy the Germans' industrial capacity. So bombing, it's not as accurate as it is today. You don't have bombing that's 100% accurate. Bombing of Japan, the atomic bomb. So the United States, the Allies, we bomb at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It does weaken them. In Hiroshima, you have 140,000 died out of the population. It should be of 400,000, sorry. Truman's motives: 1, defeat Japan. He wants to shorten the war, save American lives. And then the other one is to go ahead and show the Soviets the power, the might of the United States military. And this intimidation of the Soviet Union, this to intimidate Stalin, is going to be one of the reasons why we get the Cold War. So we show them our power and our might, and the Soviet Union's a little bit upset by this, and not just a little bit, they're really upset because we don't share with them the secrets of the atomic bomb. But don't feel too bad. Stalin does have spies within the United States, and they are taking secrets of the atomic bomb and passing it to the Soviets. So everybody's spying on everybody because nobody trusts anybody. That's just how it works. So the aftermath of the Cold War. So it's an ideological, it's a military, and it's a political difference between the Soviet Union and the United States. So what you're going to start seeing between the U.S. and the Soviet Union is intense rivalry, intense hatred towards each other based on our government and our military. At the Tehran Conference, this is November 1943, France and Britain, we agree that we're going to go ahead and invade France, alleviate France, and we agree that we're going to divide Germany. So there's going to be a division of Germany between Britain, France, the U.S., and the Soviet Union, and there will be a neutral zone, a zone that everybody kind of co-rules. At the Yalta Conference, February 1945, Germany's defeat is, I mean, it's here, you know, not that long after this conference, you're actually going to see Germany being defeated. 11 million Red Army soldiers are in Eastern Europe, and Stalin is very concerned about security, and Roosevelt's concerned about democracy. Stalin agrees that he will join, once Germany is defeated, the war against Japan. And everybody agrees to the formation of the United Nations, which would replace the failed League of Nations.